The 60s Scoop was one of the most damaging government supported practices affecting Indigenous peoples in Canada during the 20th century. The term refers to the large scale removal of Indigenous children from their families, communities, and cultures by provincial child welfare agencies. Although the practice became especially widespread during the 1960s, it occurred from the 1950s into the 1980s and affected thousands of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children. The name 60s Scoop was coined by social worker Patrick Johnston in 1983 to describe how children were literally scooped from their homes and placed into foster care or adopted by non Indigenous families. Today, the 60s Scoop is recognized as a major example of colonialism and cultural assimilation in Canada. The origins of the 60s Scoop can be traced to government policies that aimed to assimilate Indigenous peoples into mainstream Canadian society. Following amendments to the Indian Act in 1951, provincial child welfare agencies gained greater authority to intervene in Indigenous communities. Social workers often entered Indigenous communities and judged families according to non Indigenous standards of parenting, housing, and economic stability. Many Indigenous families lived in poverty because of generations of discriminatory government policies, inadequate funding, and restricted opportunities. Instead of addressing these social and economic challenges, authorities frequently removed children from their homes. In many cases, parents were not given proper information about their rights, and children were taken without meaningful consent. Once removed, Indigenous children were commonly placed with non Indigenous foster or adoptive families throughout Canada, the United States, and sometimes Europe. These placements often severed children's connections to their communities, languages, traditions, and cultural identities. Many adoptees grew up unaware of their Indigenous heritage and had little or no contact with their biological families. As a result, numerous survivors experienced feelings of isolation, confusion, and loss. Being separated from their cultural roots often made it difficult for them to develop a strong sense of identity and belonging. The 60s Scoop was closely connected to the history of the Canadian Indian residential school system. Both systems were designed around the belief that Indigenous cultures were inferior and that Indigenous children would be better off if they were raised according to Euro Canadian values. While residential schools removed children and placed them in government and church run institutions, the 60s Scoop placed children in non Indigenous homes. Despite this difference, both policies disrupted family bonds, weakened cultural continuity, and contributed to the erosion of Indigenous languages and traditions. For this reason, many historians view the 60s Scoop as a continuation of Canada's broader assimilation policies. The effects of the 60s Scoop have been profound and long-lasting. Many survivors report struggling with identity, self-esteem, mental health challenges, and feelings of disconnection from both their adoptive and biological families. Some faced racism in their adoptive communities while also feeling disconnected from Indigenous culture. The removal of so many children also harmed Indigenous communities by interrupting the transfer of cultural knowledge, language, and traditions from one generation to the next. These impacts have continued across generations, affecting not only survivors, but also their children, families, and communities. In recent decades, survivors have worked to bring attention to their experiences and seek justice. Through public testimony, research, and legal action, they have helped Canadians better understand the lasting consequences of the 60s Scoop. In 2017, the Canadian government reached a settlement with survivors and formally acknowledged the harm caused by the practice. Organizations, educators, and Indigenous leaders continue to advocate for healing, cultural revitalization, and reconciliation. Ultimately, the 60s Scoop represents a painful chapter in Canadian history. It demonstrates how government policies can profoundly affect families, cultures, and communities for generations. Understanding the 60s Scoop is essential to understanding the broader legacy of colonialism in Canada and the ongoing efforts of Indigenous peoples to reclaim their identities, strengthen their cultures, and achieve reconciliation. Through education and awareness, Canadians can better recognize the injustices of the past and support a more equitable future.